a tech tune-up type of situation. So if you guys have broad or whatever questions for me, I'll do that for about 30 minutes here, and then I'll go one by one. Is that okay? And then I can answer specific questions everyone has. Is that okay with you, Linda? Okay, sorry for the mix-up. Because you have an iPhone too, right?
I have an iPhone.
Yeah. So and like I said, so this class wasn't specifically about that, but I think if you want to stick around, I'm sure we can find some good answers.
For me, just even knowing what Android is.
Sure. Okay. If we want to start out with that, just for the sake of talking about what we did. So when we talk about iPhone and we talk about Android, the funny thing about that is really, so there's Apple, right? And there's Apple products, and there's Apple. So when we talk about Apple products, they're the manufacturer of iPhones, iPads, iMacs, etc., right? And I'm guilty of this as well, but we tend to confuse an iPhone with everything Apple. And the point is iPhone is a physical thing, right? And really, when you're talking about using Android versus iPhone, you're really talking about like the way things look on it. And that's what we're really describing. So Android, and my point here is unlike Apple, Android is made by many different manufacturers. So we're talking about Samsung, Google themselves make phones, Motorola, and then there's some other smaller companies that do it like HTC, LG used to make phones. And then so, in other words, Apple physically makes iPhones. That's all they do. These companies also make phones. But the difference is Apple owns the software or the way things look on their phone. Android can be used by all these manufacturers. So that's why they all tend to use what we call Android. So even though they can be slightly different, those manufacturers tend to make things look similar on their phones. That's really the big difference there. Yeah.
When people go and they say they just buy a phone.
Yeah.
Does that tend to be an Android?
Probably. If they're this is a blanket statement, but I'm with 95% accuracy. If they're not buying an iPhone, it's going to be an Android.
Okay, because I would have clients that they couldn't pay the bill.
Sure.
So they get rid of it and then they go buy one, and then they couldn't. Then they go buy one, and then so that was probably they kept.
Yeah, either that, and depending on what they're actually buying, if they're just buying like, believe it or not, flip phones still exist. Those are maybe Android. That's a whole other thing. But really, we're talking about smartphones, and maybe they were buying Androids. But yeah, iPhone owns iPhones, and iPhones are going to be their own thing. And then Android is kind of the way the phone works, and it can be used by many different manufacturers. So, like I said, Samsung, Motorola, etc. Does that kind of make sense? So in other words, Apple really holds on to their stuff, right? They don't let anyone else use it. Unlike Android, where they're like, okay, Android doesn't care about the physical device itself. They just release the software. And then for companies like Samsung, they don't want to worry about the software. They just want to make the phone. And so they make a partnership like that. So, okay. I'm going to make sure my video is recording really quick before I go too much going. But does that make sense what Android is? And then the problem with Android, which is why I had a little bit of anxiety about this class anyway. So Android is technically considered like open source, or can be open source, meaning that at a certain level it's all the same, but then any manufacturer like Samsung can take it and make small alterations. So it's possible that I could have ended up in like a bigger class with like, let's say 20 people. If I ended up with like newer versus older Samsungs, or newer versus older Samsungs, or things like that, it could have all looked very different. Whereas with iPhone, because they control it better, they kind of it all seems to be a lot more similar. So, Marianne, since you're here now, there was a little bit of mix-up on people's expectations of what today was. So we're kind of transitioning. We kind of made a pivot, and we're going to do kind of like a tech tune-up. So I'm answering some base questions right now, and then I'm gonna meet with everyone individually.
Great.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. More questions? Any general questions?
I have a general.
Sure.
I went from an old laptop to this new one.
Uh-huh.
And and so when I was asking my son who's far away, I wish he was close like you, and he was helping me a teeny bit. He says, "Mom, you need to know the basic terminology," because I was saying to him, "Well, my Google on the old one and my Google," he says, "No, Mom, you don't have own, you know."
Yeah.
So what's the best? I mean, to just get what to call everything and start. He says, "I'm not calling things right."
Yeah.
He says Safari is like Google, and I mean, and I'm like, oh, good. So what's the best way to just start, or where to go? I mean, you probably could set some of that out.
Yeah, you're fine. No, so great questions. I mean, in everything technical, I cannot tell you on a daily basis how many. I mean, at least in my life, everything's an acronym. So we barely call things by what they're actually called anyway. And you guys start feeling some of that, where maybe if I'm talking from a technical person to a technical person based on context, they'll know what I mean. But there's a lot of times where you don't have or understand the context to begin with, and then we start using terms, and then you really get lost, right? So don't feel that's very normal and completely okay. I wouldn't expect anyone to just understand what anything is. So to start off with some of the bigger ones that I heard you mention. So Google is a company, right? And what I mean by that is there's so many things that Google does now, you have to be more specific than Google. And that's probably what he's getting at. So back in the day, Google was just a search engine, which is a website. Okay. But the tricky part is that even though Google is a website, they also make a web browser as a product, two separate things, but still both developed by Google. And that's where the confusion gets, because you are probably not wrong. You open Google Chrome,
Right.
to go to google.com.
Right.
And even though those are two separate things, you both have the same name in there, and so that gets confusing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes. And he says, "Mom, I don't understand to help you because
Yeah.
you're not making any sense."
Yeah. 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 And that's completely okay. But the point being there is like Safari. Safari is a web browser like Google Chrome. It is more seen on iOS devices. So like if you're using an iPad or an iPhone, you are probably using Safari to look at the internet, and then on Safari you can go to google.com, right? Because they're, even though Google Chrome and google.com are related, they're different.
Right.
And Google owns Android. Like they're the one who develops Android. So like if you have an Android device, you're going to have a Google account. And that's the same thing as like your Apple account. It's like the same thing, but they call it a Google account because Google owns the Android, the software part of it. So you see what I mean? So Google is a big thing. Like when you just say, "Oh, it's Google," that's where it starts getting confusing, because you could be talking about literally 100 different things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we deal with a lot of web browsers, actually.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because laptop could be one, phone, or
Yep.
you can be doing a couple all on the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then probably the other biggest confusion that I get between things is like the difference between like a website and an app, or an app and a browser. So I'm going to start where I left off on the whole browser Google thing. I'm trying to think of probably the most common thing anyone's ever had on their computer. Has anyone used TurboTax on their computer? Right? So, okay, what about Outlook on your computer or anything like that? Okay. Yeah, which is like an email service, right? So my point is like I'm going to stick with TurboTax for a second. You can definitely go to turbotax.com and do stuff there. They also have a software you can install on your computer. So instead of going to a website, you open it from your desktop. Think about apps the same way. You could definitely go to turbotax.com, but you can install the app on your phone, right? Now the question is what's the right way of doing that? The harder answer is that there's no exactly one right way of doing things. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. And that's where it starts getting complex and confusing because people are like, oh, I have two different paths. Which one do I choose? And for this one, I mean, most things nowadays are done online, not through an app or something like that. But there is, until I know exactly what you're trying to achieve, there's not a good answer. But that's kind of the difference. Is apps are something you install, whereas a website's just something that you go out and you look. Yep. Yep. Exactly. Okay. And I think that's, I could sit here all day and go through just terms, but I think those are some of the biggest ones. Unless you had another like specific question on something else, but those, I think those are usually when I'm getting people coming to me confused about things and they're like, what is the difference between these things? Those are like the big three. Apps on your phone or tablet, your web browser, and websites, the difference between those things. And the good, bad news is that companies have gotten so good at making things usable for people that there tends to not be a lot of difference between all of those things, which is good for the sake of just being able to do stuff, bad in the sake of trying to understand what the difference is. So, I just wanted to make a really quick disclaimer that I had a thought in the back of my head while I was doing this. The reason why I kind of pivoted and changed to like this style format was because I should have realized what Kelly said. For me to make one presentation on anything and everything other than iPhone, I would have to be like here for like a whole day. That'd be a boot camp. Yeah, we'd be going through trenches at that point. So, so it's not in the fact that I don't want to um, talk on any material like that. I made the executive decision for you, and I'm sorry that this was going to be more worth our time than me trying to broadly explain everything else other than iPhone. Yeah, exactly. And that I probably would not have done this if it wasn't such a small group, but I appreciate you all, and we're pretty flexible here. So, yeah.
Simplistic question.
Sure.
When you say Android basics, you're talking about then any kind of program, whether it's on a laptop or a desktop.
Yes.
That isn't Apple is Android.
Sort of. No, you're okay. I'll repeat. So, the question is Android is essentially everything other than iPhone, and that's not 100% true.
But almost.
Almost. So the big difference there is like Windows. Windows is not Android. Windows is Windows. It's owned by Microsoft. So a lot of computers like her HP and whatnot are going to have Windows on it. Most Android devices are mobile, so either iPhones or tablets. Or excuse me, I said iPhone. Phones, smartphones, or tablets. Most of those that aren't Apple are using Android. Yeah. Does that make sense? Am I being?
Sort of.
Yeah. So let me run it back like this. So I hate to use the term operating system, but I think it's been around long enough that I think we'll understand. So does anyone know what I mean by operating system? So if you think about the word operating, it's the way in which something works.
Like Chrome?
No. But no, you're totally okay. And that's kind of her point too, is you start using these terms and they start getting confusing. So that's why I'm trying not to use the big words. But operating system, if you pull that apart, it's essentially operating, which is how something works in the system and the system around how it works, right? So like Linda, we ran into this. Remember when you got your Apple and it was just vastly different than the computer you had prior?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So that was because they ran two different operating systems.
Yes.
Right. So the MacBook, it ran Mac OS, which is very similar to iOS, which is on iPhones, right? versus Windows, which is what most Dells, HPs, Lenovo's, like anything else. And that's actually a perfect point. So, you buy an HP, you buy a Dell, you buy a Lenovo, and they pretty much, even though they're manufactured by different people, they pretty much operate the same, correct? So think about that for Android, but for phones. So if you buy a HP computer, a Dell computer, or a Lenovo computer, they're all going to pretty much operate the same. And that's Windows. Yeah, Windows. Yep, because they have Windows. So now get rid of the computer part and think about a phone or a tablet. You can go and buy a phone or a tablet from Samsung, um, uh, Motorola. There's a couple other smaller companies, OnePlus, forgetting a big one, Google. So those are manufacturers of phones, just like they're manufacturers HP, Dell, Lenovo. But instead of having Windows in common, they have Android in common. So Android is the operating system for those phones. So in other words, they make the hardware and need the software to run it.
And that's mostly phones and tablets.
Exactly, yeah. Whereas Windows is mostly computers. There is some fringe gray crossover there, but those aren't typical. Does that make it clearer? It's okay. It's
Not really.
Okay.
After a while, it's just, I said, yes, I recognize this from.
Sure. Think about it like this. Think about like HP to Windows as Samsung is to Android. So Android describes the way in which you're going to use the phone, not who makes it. So Samsung makes the phone, and then Android is going to be what they put on there so it looks like it. So Android is what's controlling how you send text messages. It's controlling how you look at photos. It's controlling how you put apps on the phone, all that stuff. It's just describing, it's the system, exactly. It's just the system on how all that stuff works and is organized. So some of you looked more clear before, and then I said that, and now some of you look more confused. No, no, it's okay. Really, what?
So you said if a Mac doesn't have Windows, it has the AOI. That's the wrong initial.
iOS is what you were thinking of, and it's going to be pretty much. So really, without getting complicated, what it boils down to, hang on, don't let the terms go over your head. All it means is it's just describing what it's going to look and feel like when you're using it. That's all the difference is. So Android is going to have a different look and feel. iPhone's going to have a different look and feel.
So what do you have?
This is Windows.
Okay, you have
Right, because it's a laptop.
okay.
And most laptops that aren't Apple are Windows.
Do you also have a Mac?
Not personal. I have used one, but yep. Yeah.
Because I find, like, my son uses a Mac, but he has to do all sorts of editing and stuff like that. He tried to talk me into getting a Mac.
Yeah. No, yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, this is going to boil down to the people who have been through the experience of like where they've always bought HPs or Dells, whether they knew it had Windows on it or not. That's just what they've bought and they've used, and they're comfortable with it and using it. And then they switch to like a MacBook or an Apple product, and expecting it to look and feel the same because it's a computer, right? It's just someone who made it different, right? HP versus Mac. But then you realize that they're run by different systems, and that's when it gets confusing because things look different or they act different or they don't respond the way that you are. And that's the whole Android thing. And that's why people, and all the confused looks I'm getting is the reason why Android kind of ended up with this stigma. There's nothing wrong with Android at all. But the problem is that it can vary so slightly in the way that it works that people get frustrated with it.
What's HP?
Hewlett Packard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just I'm just describing someone else who makes hardware.
You said HP or Dell.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that gets really confusing too because with Apple it's so hard because Apple makes their own hardware and they make their own software. They're unique. They're very unique. A lot of the rest of the world, they focus on making the physical thing that you hold. then there's other companies that focus on making the software on it that runs it, right? Usually those are separate. Like HP and Microsoft aren't the same company, but they work together to make that thing work. Whereas Apple, they have both components all in-house. And that's where it gets really confusing. So again, I'm a phone company and I'm making a Samsung whatever, but that's all I care about. I just want to make that physical phone. I want to sell that physical phone. It's up to Android to make a software or for them to team up for the phone to end up being usable. Does that make sense?
I didn't know that what you have is the same as Android. I didn't know that. What does she have? This is just an iPad.
So this is an iPad. So this one is
Is an Apple?
it is an Apple.
Okay.
Yeah, but Androids are very common for tablets too.
Tablet, that was the word.
Yeah, tablet.
Well,
Yeah.
see, my Kindle
Oh,
is almost another animal, but it's totally Android, right?
It is. It's like a different we call flavor.
yeah.
It's a different flavor, which means it'll feel very similar in some aspects, but not in others. And this is a perfect example. So Amazon wanted to build cheap tablets, which they did very successfully, and they're very good machines. But they didn't want to focus on creating the software to run it. So they just took Android, changed a little bit that they wanted to make it fit their needs, and then put it on there, right? They're not like Apple that started at the very ground level and built all the way up.
And we don't have to know all this.
No, you don't. It's just,
What am I writing?
yeah. No. And don't get me wrong, I know this is really technical and I'm not trying to talk over your heads, but you have to know a little bit just to be able to kind of understand the difference, right? So I promise I could be really getting into it. We're still really only scratching, I promise. But that's why it gets confusing, is because there's so many, and this whole class right now is just a good like actual example of why all these terms and objects and things get really confusing and muddy, and maybe you're saying one thing when you really mean another and you're like, well, to me it's all the same, and that's totally totally okay and understandable. So anyway,
I'm glad there's only 7.
yeah. Okay, I mean, I know that was a long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully that somewhat gave you a different idea of what we were talking about.
Yeah, sort of.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Um,
What is vexes me is the fact that, and by the way, I got rid of the apple.
sure. Yeah, sure.
I just gave it to a younger person.
Yeah, which is totally okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
But a problem there I've discovered is that things pop up and that you didn't ask for.
Yes.
And that a Microsoft piece of knowledge or action intervened.
Yes.
And that is why I can't get a password and to my bank account because and I need really to get some problem solving. How do you get rid of the darn Microsoft piece that came up?
Yeah. So I know what you're saying. So the good and bad news about that is it's usually pretty easy to fix, but there are so many things nowadays that just pop up
Yeah.
in a general that for me right now, I would actually have to see exactly, because what you
I was going to have
yeah
come to my
yeah yeah I would have to see it. But the problem, so with all of these things that are legitimate, let me say that there are definitely pop-ups that are not legitimate, that are scams, blah 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 blah. That's another section. I'm going to put that to the side. But if you use Microsoft or any product, Apple, Android, Microsoft, whatever, there's always going to be notifications, which is what you're talking about, pop-ups, notifications. There's always, or 90% of the time, going to be a setting somewhere to turn that off, so it doesn't do that anymore. But the problem is that depending on what actually is popping up, that setting could be in 100 different places.
I think if I could,
Yeah.
develop a personal cheat sheet
Sure.
that will deal with the specific problem that keeps
Yeah.
coming up.
Yeah.
And then I can go to my cheat sheet and hope that I followed it correctly.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Can you do maybe that needs to be one-on-one?
I only because I think I would need to see specifically what is happening. Because like I said, pop-ups aren't really unique anymore. They can be produced by any number of things. But I could definitely help you develop a cheat sheet. I have done it for other people too. So they're like, and I'm like, okay. Yeah. If you happen to be in situation A, do B, C, and D, or situation 1A, B, C. So, okay. What other questions? Yes.
I think for me to better understand it, by having an Android, what does it restrict you from?
So really, and that's a big common misconception I think there is. There's no restrictions.
Okay.
And I'm going to say that, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. So everyone always wants to, let me back up one more tick. There are more iPhones than Androids. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. So what happens is when you are feeling restricted, it's mostly because you're an Android in an iPhone world. So what I mean by that is it's like a big common problem that there is between iPhones and Androids is if an Android sends a photo through text to an iPhone or vice versa, it does not always look good. And the difference is not that there is a limitation on the Android, which is what they want to lead you to believe. It's the fact that they're two different systems trying to talk in the same way and they can't. And that's really the problem that you're having. So, see you, Linda. Talk to you soon. Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you.
Yes, tell Jack hello.
So when you say restriction, in my mind, what you're asking me is like, okay, my Android phone cannot do X, meaning I cannot send photos in my text messages, for example. But that's not true. It's just because they're competing technologies. They don't always play well. So like if you were to send a photo to another Android device, it would most likely look completely fine. But it's really when you cross that line between one system to another is where things get weird. And so like another common thing that I've heard people say, iPhones have this function called AirDrop, which is an iPhone to iPhone protocol. It's just the way it works. Androids have different versions of it, but people with an iPhone say, oh, your phone can't do that because it can't do it from their phone to your phone, but that's as much of an iPhone problem as it is an Android problem. So there's really a misconception, and I have that in my slides. Like, people want to say that Androids are inferior devices, but they're not. In some ways, they're actually superior, but there's a stigma around it, and that's what happens. It's misinformation. Yeah.
So let me turn that around now. By having an iPhone like Susan has, what does it restrict her from?
Yeah, and again, it's very similar answer. There's just going to be really nothing, right? The two biggest things with iPhones that are going to happen is like similar things like with text messages. If she sends you photos through messages, they may look funny on your phone or doing other things like that. Another thing is like, and again, this is like cross the line there, but everyone uses the term FaceTime. You FaceTime this or you FaceTime that. Really, FaceTiming is one thing. What we're actually using is what you're doing is doing a video call. So a video call is not specific to Android or iPhone, but FaceTime, the way that iPhones do video calls, is not the same way that Android do video calls. So even though Androids and iPhones can both do video calls, they don't do it in the same way. And because they don't talk the same language, you can't video call an Android like you would on an iPhone and vice versa. So it's very similar. Yeah, I'm gonna say I was saying there's two things, and there is really like one big difference between the two. But it's like a really technical thing, and I'll just say it really quick. But iPhones, all the software and everything is locked down. You can't get to what makes it tick, right? People with Androids really like it because it's very customizable. If you had the skills, you could really open it up and change anything you wanted about it. Whereas iPhones, they really limit you to certain settings and changes and things like that.
So would it help me understand that better if the wording said iPhones on this channel and Androids on this channel? Is that
Absolutely.
okay? Now,
Absolutely.
little
Correct.
better,
That does
little
help
better.
explain.
Yes.
You're right.
I'm
Absolutely.
just trying to get it in my brain.
Yes, but you're exactly right. There's no, and like I said, I was going to go on a whole spiel about this to the whole class because I do feel like people who use Androids, they feel like lesser citizens,
Yeah.
and it's not like that. It's truly not. It's just unfortunately Apple is, they're Apple, right? They're
They're marketing
right.
the idea that they're better than
Yes.
Android. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's marketing.
Correct. And they are one of the founders of modern technology. So they're going to have vastly more resources. And so that's what it is. It's just market share is what you're dealing with. You're not actually dealing with physical limitations. Like I said, in certain instances, Androids actually have the ability to do more. But when you live in a world of iPhones that only speak iPhone and you're an Android, that is the true limit. So
one more, clear the clouds one more time.
please.
So Apple is always iPhone,
Yes.
so they're on that channel.
Correct.
And Apple is not over here with the Android.
Correct.
No. Okay.
Correct.
And that's a trade name, Apple.
That is a trade name, yes.
And is it the operating system?
It is the operating.
It is the operating
So, well, excuse me. So Apple is the manufacturer, the whole company.
Right.
So you know how I was kind of talking like Google? Like Google's one company, but it has many things.
Mm-hmm.
So iPhone refers to the hardware, the physical thing that you can touch and feel.
Okay.
iOS, or iPhone operating system, is what that stands for, is the software. Again, just kind of how like Google is google.com or Google Chrome. You know what I mean? But yes, two different channels still. iPhone and iOS are always going to be on this channel, and Android and Samsung and whatnot are always going to be on this channel.
Okay.
Now, that being said, if you go out and buy a brand new Android phone like today and a brand new iPhone today and get like the latest, there are some improvements on some of the cross talk stuff. Still far away from being completely compatible. I hope one day Apple realizes that if they let people do things the same way, that's not going to change the fact that they have the majority of the market. They just need to let that notion go. And I think it will happen eventually, but at this point, but it is getting better. Sorry, my whole point is it is getting better. Like Android users are getting closer to being able to just use their phone like normal, and compared to iPhone. So.
And later we can ask you 2 personal questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll probably take like one more like group discussion, then I'll go around. Unless you guys, do you have any broad questions? Yeah, I know. Let me see.
Make sure you covered up everything.
Well, I didn't cover everything, but there was a couple things that I wanted to say.
Phones on silent. That's a good one.
Yeah, this was
I put mine on vibrate, so I don't always hear the phone call coming in. Like
right.
Bonnie tried to call me here today, but it protects me from so much coming in when I'm trying to get dressed or do something.
We're in the same boat. My phone is almost never on ring.
But at least there's a message that you can get back.
Yep, and that's pretty much what I do. That's why I always tell.
Silent vibrate. That's a good thing. Because I get scolded for doing that.
It's okay. Yeah.
Not Bonnie. I'm talking about my daughter.
Yeah. No, you're good. Yeah. But this was my disclaimer on Android phones. They are good. They are secure. That's another thing that people say is they're not secure. That's not true. And I won't get into the technical aspects of that, but they're not. Or they are. And they are fantastic tools. I feel like there's so many people that are like, I have an Android.
Yeah.
I messed up. I made the wrong decision. And I'm like, well, not 100% true. Anyway, Okay, I think I touched on everything. Again, thank you for your patience with this whole meeting thing. Like I said, I'll follow up with Kelly and just let her know that I need to be. I'll have to look back. I don't know if it was me who misunderstood what I was trying to say or her, but either way, I'm going to say it's both our faults and we will communicate better in the
Well, and it's a
future.
matter of interpretation.
Exactly.
Because when
Yeah.
I read it, I thought Android. Obviously not everybody did.
Well,
Ye-
I also knew that probably the people would bring in their laptops too. So I thought, well, anything that's not.
Exactly. And
Could be my laptop, right?
which is a very fair assumption if you hear the word everything. But in my head, I was like, there's no way I can actually do everything. So I think there was, yeah, you know what I mean? So anyway, this is a lesson learned for me, for Kelly, for all of us. No problem. Yeah. So, man, fleeting thoughts today. My head is going so fast. I had a thought and I forgot. Yeah, I know. Yeah, let's break down to one-on-ones if you want. I'm going to start on this side because you were very patient last time we did these, and the class was over and everyone's gone and we were still dealing with this. So I'm going to go this way. Okay.
Oh, boy.
Um,
Can we listen to it?
well, it's up to her, but
Yeah.